So today for our Moravian text reading, we're in Galatians chapter 5, verse 7 to 18. Yesterday we were reading about this glorious freedom that we have in Christ. Freedom that can be lost. The grace that we can fall away from. And it's primarily talking about freedom from all the 613 Old Testament rules and regulations that the Jews used as a measure of holiness in order to inherit the blessings of God. The true gospel says we are saved by grace through faith. By grace we are gifted with something that we could never earn or don't deserve, and we receive it by believing it, by saying yes to it, by in faith we take hold of it. This is how we continue to live the Christian life, in walking in holiness. By grace we are gifted with holiness. Through faith we believe it, we say yes to it, we say this is who I really am, my true identity. I believe that this is who I am. And in this community in Galatia there were Jews who'd received Jesus as Messiah. Paul calls them the Judaizers. They were saying to those non-Jewish believers, you've got to believe it, receive it, and do X, Y, and Z. Here are the rules you need to follow. Grace plus these works. And of course, in one sense, it was okay for that group to follow those Old Testament rules as a sort of cultural thing, as long as they weren't trying to earn salvation through it, as long as they weren't trying to impose it onto others. They could follow Jesus and observe the kosher food laws and the Sabbath day and the particular ways of dressing in that community as their witness to that community, as a cultural identity. But it became a problem when they forced it onto the Gentiles, in particular this issue of circumcision. And that was a particularly important one because for the Jew that was a sign, a symbol, an external sign that they belonged to Abraham, that they were Abraham's descendants, Abraham's seed. And Paul does make a joke actually here and says those Judaizers calling for the removal of the skin in circumcision, I wish they'd just go the whole way. He makes it into a little bit of a joke to prove its silliness. He talks about their influences like yeast in the dough. You put a little bit of yeast into the dough and it causes the whole thing to rise. It influences the whole thing. That's true for positive things. It's true for negative things. Ideas, beliefs can spread like yeast in dough across a community. So what does this freedom in Christ look like? And what does this grace way of living mean? Well, it certainly doesn't look like indulging in the old sinful nature. That is not living in grace. Grace is not a license to sin. We know we're living in grace because it becomes our joy and delight to live in a way that pleases Jesus. This is a freedom to love. And you've probably heard the quote from St. Augustine, who said, love God and do as thou wilt. In other words, love God and you don't have to then get caught up in all the rules and regulations, because your expression of love for God isn't how you love others and live in holiness. And we were looking at a different picture metaphor for that in the start of Galatians chapter 4, the difference between being a child and a son, an heir. And a child effectively lives as a slave in the house, but the son who is mature lives in the good of the inheritance. It's a picture of how we grow up into our holiness that we have been gifted with. Verse 16, we have this incredible promise. This is a promise. It says, walk by the Spirit and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. Live by the Spirit, walk by the Spirit. I would say you will reflex with a holy life. It's about intimacy, it's about encounter. If we make following the rules and regulations the goal, the aim, we end up in religious duty, striving, self-effort. It is wearying, it leads to burnout. If we make intimacy, moment by moment, walking with the Spirit, listening to the Spirit, enjoying the presence of the Spirit, gospeling ourselves in each moment, our reflex outcome is walking in holiness. The Spirit empowers us to fulfill the law and to live in grace and holiness that have been gifted to us.